Good evening. Let me start by laying out exactly what is happening and where we are without rushing it. There is a debate unfolding inside the European Union that is, on its face, about membership. But in practice, it is about timing, economics, elections, and the shadow of a war that is still ongoing. Hungary's Prime Minister Viktor Orbán has intensified his opposition to Ukraine's potential accession to the European Union. He has done so clearly, publicly, and with emphasis. The specific timeline matters here. Ukraine is seeking accession by the year 2027. That goal has been reaffirmed by Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy. He has stated it plainly, even as opposition inside the EU remains. Hungary's resistance is not vague, it is framed in economic terms. Prime Minister Orbán has argued that Ukraine's accession would be economically disadvantageous. That framing is central to his position, and it is not happening in a vacuum. This intensified opposition comes ahead of upcoming elections in Hungary. That context is present, even when it is not always foregrounded. At the same time, the broader geopolitical environment cannot be separated from this discussion. Russia's war against Ukraine continues. That war forms the background against which every statement, every position, every reaffirmation takes place. That matters, because EU accession is not just a procedural issue. It is political, it is economic, and it is deeply connected to how countries inside the European Union define their interests right now. Orbán's position represents a clear resistance to Ukraine's path forward within the EU framework. It is not conditional language, it is not tentative, it is a doubling down. Meanwhile, President Zelenskyy has responded by reaffirming Ukraine's goal, not revising it, not delaying it, reaffirming it. Those two positions now exist in direct contrast. On one side, a Hungarian prime minister emphasizing economic disadvantage and domestic political timing. On the other, a Ukrainian president emphasizing continued commitment to accession, despite opposition and despite the war. And that war, ongoing and unresolved, presses in on all of this. You cannot separate the accession debate from the broader Russia war context. They are intertwined. The European Union, as an institution, operates through consensus and negotiation. That means opposition from a single member state carries weight. Hungary's stance, therefore, has consequences beyond rhetoric. It shapes the conversation. And Orbán's decision to intensify that stance signals something important about where this debate is heading, at least in the near term. You can feel the tension right here. That tension exists because timelines collide with politics, because economic arguments collide with geopolitical realities, because Ukraine's stated goals collide with internal EU resistance. And none of this is abstract. The year 2027 is not a distant horizon. It is a defined target. Ukraine's leadership has attached meaning to that date. Hungary's leadership has attached resistance to that trajectory. Both positions are now on record. What makes this moment particularly notable is the firmness on both sides. There is no hedging language here. Orbán's opposition is intensified, not softened. Zelenskyy's goal is reaffirmed, not reconsidered. And all of it unfolds while a war continues to reshape Europe's political landscape. That is the setup. That is the frame. Everything that follows flows from this contrast. Resistance versus reaffirmation, economic caution versus accession ambition, domestic elections versus international alignment. We're standing at a hinge point. This is where we begin. So once that frame is set, once we understand who is saying what and when they are saying it, the next thing to look at is how those positions sit next to each other, without embellishment, without inference, just as they are. Hungary's prime minister has not softened his language. He has intensified it. That word matters because it signals continuation, not reaction. This is not a response to a single comment or a single development. It is a sustained position. Viktor Orbán has placed his opposition to Ukraine's European Union accession squarely in economic terms. He has described Ukraine's entry as economically disadvantageous. That framing is deliberate. It places the discussion in the realm of national interest as defined through financial impact. It is not couched in moral language. It is not framed as temporary. And importantly, It is being voiced ahead of upcoming elections in Hungary. You know, timing is not neutral in politics. Statements made in election seasons carry a different weight than those made in quiet moments. Orbán's emphasis on economic disadvantage speaks to domestic considerations. It aligns the EU accession debate with internal political priorities. At the same time, Ukraine's position remains unchanged. President Volodymyr Zelenskyy has reaffirmed Ukraine's goal of joining the European Union by 2027. Reaffirmed is the key word here. This is not a recalibration. This is not a conditional aspiration. It is a restatement of intent, and that intent is being expressed despite clear opposition from within the EU, despite Hungary's intensified resistance, despite the ongoing war with Russia. That combination is striking. Ukraine is pursuing a long-term institutional goal while navigating an active conflict. That context is not incidental. The broader Russia war context is inseparable from this discussion. It forms the environment in which all of these statements are made. Hungary's opposition does not exist outside that environment, nor does Ukraine's persistence. The war has reshaped political calculations across Europe. But here, what we see is not convergence, we see divergence. On one side, a member state emphasizing caution, economic cost, and national interest. On the other, a country seeking integration, setting a firm date, and reiterating that objective publicly. The European Union itself becomes the arena where these positions meet, and as an institution, it requires agreement. That makes resistance consequential. Orbán's intensified opposition is not symbolic. It signals a real obstacle within the accession process. And Zelenskyy's reaffirmation is equally consequential. It signals that Ukraine is not backing away from its stated timeline. I mean, this is where it gets very real. Because accession is not just about desire. It is about approval. And approval depends on member states. Hungary's stance therefore introduces friction into Ukraine's path. That friction is now clearly visible. At the same time, the war with Russia continues to exert pressure on every diplomatic and political decision related to Ukraine. It is always present, even when not explicitly referenced. The summary of events does not describe new proposals, compromises, or negotiations. What it shows is a hardening of positions. Orbán doubles down, Zelenskyy reaffirms. Those verbs tell us almost everything we need to know. There is no indication here of movement toward consensus. There is no signal of retreat. Instead, there is clarity. Hungary is resisting Ukraine's accession timeline. Ukraine is maintaining it. That clarity is important because it strips away ambiguity. It tells us exactly where each leader stands at this moment. And it tells us that the debate is not theoretical. It is active. Economic disadvantage is not presented as a hypothetical concern by Orbán. It is presented as a reason for opposition. Likewise, the 2027 accession goal is not presented as aspirational rhetoric by Zelenskyy. It is presented as a reaffirmed objective. Between those two positions sits the European Union, operating within a geopolitical landscape shaped by war. That is a lot of pressure in one place. What makes this particularly consequential is that neither side is speaking quietly. These are public statements. They are meant to be heard, both domestically and internationally. Orbán's message speaks to Hungarian voters as elections approach. Zelenskyy's message speaks to Ukrainians, to EU leaders, and to the broader international community. Both are staking out ground, and that ground, at least for now, does not overlap. There's no mistaking the lines being drawn. The Russia war context intensifies the stakes. It heightens the meaning of EU accession. It raises the implications of opposition. But within the strict bounds of what has been said, what we can observe is this. Opposition has increased. Commitment has been restated. No more, no less. That is the deep middle of this moment. That is where things stand. So now, as we come to the end of this account, what matters most is not what might happen next, or what could change, or how this might resolve. What matters is where things stand, exactly as they have been stated. Hungary's Prime Minister has intensified opposition to Ukraine's accession to the European Union. That opposition is framed as economic disadvantage. It is expressed clearly, it is expressed publicly, and it is voiced in the context of upcoming elections in Hungary. Those facts sit together. They do not contradict each other. Ukraine, meanwhile, has not altered its position. President Volodymyr Zelenskyy has reaffirmed Ukraine's goal of joining the European Union by 2027. That reaffirmation stands despite opposition from within the EU. It stands despite the broader geopolitical tensions linked to Russia's ongoing war. These two positions now exist at the same time. Neither has been withdrawn, neither has been softened. The European Union remains the institutional setting in which this debate unfolds. Membership requires agreement. Resistance, therefore, matters. Hungary's stance is not an aside, it is a formal position taken by a member state. Ukraine's goal is not aspirational language, it is a stated objective with a defined timeline. And the war with Russia continues in the background, shaping the environment in which all of this occurs. That context does not override the statements made, but it frames them. Orbán's opposition is connected to economic concerns and domestic political timing. Zelenskyy's reaffirmation is connected to Ukraine's long-term direction and alignment with Europe. Both leaders have chosen to speak plainly. There is no indication here of compromise. There is no announcement of negotiation. What we are left with is clarity. Sometimes clarity is quiet, sometimes it is tense. Here it is simply firm. You can hear it in the stillness. Hungary is signaling resistance. Ukraine is signaling persistence. The European Union is the space where those signals converge. The broader Russia war context remains present, influencing perceptions and priorities without altering the stated facts. And that is where this moment rests. Not resolved, not escalated beyond words, just defined. Defined by opposition, defined by reaffirmation, defined by timing, economics, and war. Nothing has been added, nothing has been taken away. This is not a turning point announced with fanfare. It is a snapshot of positions held. And sometimes, in international politics, that is the most important thing to understand. That's where the record stops. This is the point at which we close the account, having followed it carefully, without assumption, without embellishment, and without prediction.